Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: Russian drones enter Polish airspace, heightening tensions in Europe. Reports say Trump wants the EU to sanction China for buying Russian oil. The Indian Prime Minister echoing Trump's comments that his country and the U.S. remain close friends. It was after Modi visited China and met with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. LeBron's trip to China resulted in a surprise, an op-ed under his name in China's state media, one that his team says he never wrote. What's the deal here? A Chinese commentator breaks it down. The Supreme Court will fast-track a review of lower court rulings overturning many of the Trump administration's tariffs. It's a move that could also affect tariffs on China. And one of NTD's most anticipated competitions is back this week. Ning sat down with one of the judges to break down what sets NTD's classical Chinese dance competition apart from others. Tensions are rising in Europe again. Russian drones entered Polish airspace last night, triggering fresh concern across European and NATO countries. It's still unclear whether Putin and Zelensky will enter negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. President Trump reportedly wants Europe to join the United States in imposing steep tariffs on the biggest buyers of Russian oil, China and India. It's an effort to pressure Putin into negotiations.
19 Russian drones entered the Polish airspace on Tuesday. Poland then asked NATO to assess whether the Russian action should be considered a threat against a NATO member. The NATO chief responded on Wednesday.
As I said, a full assessment is ongoing. But of course, whether it was intentionally or not, it is absolutely reckless.
EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen raised the issue during an annual State of the Union speech.
Europe is in a fight for a continent that is whole and at peace, for a free and independent Europe.
Russia's defense ministry says it did not plan to attack any targets in Poland. In Washington, the European Union's sanctions envoy David O'Sullivan and other European officials discussed putting new sanctions on Russia with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. On Sunday, Bessent suggested the European Union partner with the U.S. to collapse the Russian economy.
We're prepared to increase pressure on Russia, but we need our European partners to follow us, because if the U.S. and the EU do this together, we are in a race now between how long can the Ukrainian military hold up versus how long can the Russian economy hold up. And if the U.S. and the EU can come in, do more sanctions, secondary tariffs on the countries that buy Russian oil, the Russian economy will be in full collapse, and that will bring President Putin to the table.
Putin and Zelensky still have not entered into negotiations to end the war. So it's possible the U.S. will soon hit Russia and its allies with additional secondary tariffs. Washington has already imposed a 25% punitive tariff on India for its purchases of Russian oil. Now, according to several media outlet reports, including the Financial Times and Reuters, President Trump wants the EU to impose 100% tariffs on China and India. As pressure builds, Trump is also sounding the alarm on Russia's latest provocation. He wrote on social media, quote, "What's with Russia violating Poland's airspace with drones? Here we go." On Tuesday, Trump told reporters that a call with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, will take place this week or early next week.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi echoed President Trump's remarks on Wednesday, calling the U.S. and India close friends and natural partners. Modi added, "I am also looking forward to speaking with President Trump. We'll work together to secure a brighter, more prosperous future for both our people." His comments follow the high-profile visit to China, where he was seen alongside Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin. The moment went viral online. In response, President Trump said, "It looks like we've lost India and Russia to the darkest China." But now the tone has changed. The White House has urged New Delhi to halt purchases of sanctioned Russian oil. President Trump is also pressuring Modi to drop tariffs on the U.S. exports. Ahead of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen says Europe is in a fight for its own future. Speaking at the European Parliament on Wednesday, she had this to say about the trade deal with the U.S.
And honourable members, I do not believe in tariffs. Tariffs are taxes. But the deal provides crucial stability in our relations with the United States at a time of grave global insecurity. Think of the repercussions of a full-fledged trade war with the United States. Picture the chaos, and then put that image next to the one from China just last week. China flanked by the leaders from Russia and North Korea.
Von der Leyen added, quote, battle lines for a new world order based on power are being drawn. She also said that many major powers were, quote, ambivalent or openly hostile to Europe. Staying in Europe, Poland says it's the closest it has ever been to an open conflict since World War II. Prime Minister Donald Tusk made the comments today after the NATO member state shot down Russian drones over its territory.
Poland shot down drones that entered its airspace on Wednesday, with a drone-like object striking a residential building in the country's east. It's the first time a member of NATO is known to have fired shots during Russia's war in Ukraine. Poland said 19 objects had entered its airspace during a large Russian air attack on Ukraine, and that it had shot down those that posed a threat. Prime Minister Donald Tusk said he had activated Article 4 of NATO's treaty, under which alliance members can demand consultations with their allies.
We are most likely dealing with a large-scale provocation. But at the same time, we are in consultation with our allies. I am in constant contact with the NATO Secretary General. This is so that we can respond to this type of threat as effectively as we did tonight.
A NATO spokesperson said NATO chief Mark Rutte was in touch with Polish leadership and the alliance was consulting closely with Poland. Russia's RIA state news agency quoted a Russian diplomat calling the accusations groundless, with no evidence the drones were of Russian origin. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said Russia used over 400 drones and 40 missiles in attacks on Ukraine overnight, with at least 8 Iranian-made drones aimed towards Poland. He said it sets an extremely dangerous precedent for Europe and a strong response from all partners is needed. Poland's armed forces urged residents to stay at home, with 3 eastern regions at particular risk.
In an unprecedented move, China's state-run media published an op-ed under NBA star LeBron James' name, but reports citing his representatives say that LeBron never wrote it. They claim that he only answered a few questions during press stops in China. It all began with an article on People's Daily titled "Basketball is the Bridge Connecting Each Other," featuring LeBron James as its author. Written in the NBA player's tone, the article expressed how much LeBron adores his Chinese fans and that he hopes to contribute to China's basketball industry. It ended by noting, quote, "The author is a member of the Los Angeles Lakers," and said the paper's reporter handled the summary and translation. This article and the news about LeBron's contribution to People's Daily has been widely spread across China, but it drew criticism in the Western media circle. Many reports point to NBA and LeBron's records of siding with China over the communist regime's human rights issues. A day later, the Associated Press and others changed their narratives. They denied any interactions between LeBron and the People's Daily, claiming the comments were put together from various group interviews. David Zhang, host of China Insider, weighs in.
It's good to know for those watching that the CCP's media narrative twisting of this event is something that's worth mentioning. So it's not just to fault LeBron James, but also we have to be very careful of the media manipulation that's been taking place from the CCP.
According to Sports Business Journal, NBA's China branch was worth $5 billion back in 2019. Star players like LeBron James and Steph Curry also have investments in the country. But all those green dollar signs were at risk of vanishing in 2019. That year, Beijing launched another crackdown on Hong Kong's free speech and human rights, and one NBA manager spoke out.
In 2019, we all remember that Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey was voicing his support for the democracy protesters in Hong Kong. And that led to partially or maybe fully the suspension of NBA broadcast on Chinese platforms.
The NBA saw its Chinese business partners suspend contracts and its products boycotted nationwide despite the league's apologies. Retaliation gradually eased between 2020 and 2022, but the NBA's business in China still hasn't fully recovered.
The CCP likes to use foreign model celebrities and influencers to project its own agenda or words that they want to be told to the international stage. So it's no secret that somebody like LeBron James, who has a previous record of speaking on behalf of the CCP, or at least attempting to agree with some of the points from the CCP, is somebody that's perfectly a good candidate for the CCP to use to project the CCP's agenda.
From retaliating against an NBA employee's freedom of speech to reportedly misleading its viewers about LeBron's so-called op-ed, the Chinese Communist Party has shown the West time and again that working with Beijing is a deal of no loss, no gain. This comes as the NBA works to rebuild its ties with China. Coming up, the Supreme Court will fast-track a review of lower court rulings overturning many of the Trump administration's tariffs. It's a move that could also affect tariffs on China. A group of House lawmakers is set to make an official trip to China soon. What's their goal? And one of NTD's most anticipated competitions is back this week. Ning sat down with one of the judges to break down what sets NTD's classical Chinese dance competition apart from others. That and more in just a minute here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Moving on to major tariff news. The Supreme Court has agreed to fast-track a review of lower court rulings that struck down many of the Trump administration's tariffs. The decision could also impact Washington's tariffs on China. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that and updates on trade talks with India.
Liberation Day.
The tariffs affected by current legal wrangling are President Trump's fentanyl and reciprocal tariffs, imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977. The two cases were consolidated by the High Court and will be heard together in the first week of November. No justices dissented, and the court did not explain its decision. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent defended Trump's use of the Emergency Powers Act for fentanyl tariffs, speaking on NBC's Meet the Press.
I'm not sure on what planet this fentanyl crisis with 200,000 Americans being killed every year, this poison coming across the border, why can the president not use tariffs to stop that?
Bessent says using emergency powers for reciprocal tariffs, meaning a tariff intended to match another country's tariff, was also justified.
We have reached a tipping point in terms of our trade balance. That is what has created the emergency situation, and we are trying to bring the trade into balance.
Bessent says the Treasury Department would be forced to issue tariff-related rebates if they lose the Supreme Court case.
We would have to give a refund on about half the tariffs, which would be terrible for the Treasury.
The Treasury Secretary says there could be other avenues to imposing tariffs if the High Court rules against those duties, but says those maneuvers would diminish the authority of the Trump administration. President Trump says everything is at stake in the key case.
If we don't win that case, our country is going to suffer so greatly.
Over to India. President Trump says trade talks between the U.S. and India continue. The comments follow Trump recently suggesting the South Asian country was lost to communist China. The president wrote on Truth Social on Tuesday, "I look forward to speaking with my very good friend, Prime Minister Modi, in the upcoming weeks." Trump added that he feels certain there will be no difficulty in finding a successful outcome for both nations. Modi reciprocated the optimism in a social media post, saying Washington and New Delhi are close friends and natural partners. Modi says teams from both countries are working to finish up trade discussions as soon as possible. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
A group of House lawmakers led by Representative Adam Smith is set to make an official trip to China later this month. The trip comes amid strained relations between the U.S. and China over issues like trade, technology, and cybersecurity. In an interview with NBC, Smith said that the trip is, quote, part of wanting to try to open up a dialogue between the U.S. and China. When asked about a possible meeting with the Chinese regime leader, Smith said they've made the request, but it's still unclear if it will happen. NTD's International Classical Chinese Dance Competition is returning for its 11th year this week, running from Thursday to Sunday. NTD's Ning sat down with William Lee, one of this year's judges, for his insights on the ancient art form in this year's contest.
I'm delighted to be joined by William Lee. He's one of the judges this year. He's also a principal dancer with Shenyun Performing Arts. William, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here. Now, for our audience who may not be familiar, can you introduce classical Chinese dance to us a little?
Of course. Thank you for having me here. Classical Chinese dance is one of the most comprehensive dance systems in the world. And what makes it stick out, it's very technical and very difficult, but the bearing aspect of it, the Shenyun aspect of it, is really different from a lot of other dance forms. And we want to emphasize that inner spirit, the character and integrity of all of our dancers.
Now, how would you say classical Chinese dance is different from Western ballet or other forms of dance?
I think in ballet, it really emphasizes lines. It's also very, very technical, and there's a lot of similarities in that, and it's also very graceful. But in classical Chinese dance, it's again the bearing, and I think it's the cultural depth as well. It has 5,000 years of history, and it's really absorbed a lot of the essence of the different dynasties in Chinese history. So with such a rich and long history, that's really reflected in the movements in classical Chinese dance. And you see it on stage. What the dancers are depicting is usually these historical themes or these values that traditional Chinese culture emphasizes, these virtues. For example, like loyalty, filial piety, compassion. You're going to see a lot of these themes in classical Chinese dance.
Well, China has been, as we know, under communist rule for a long time. Now, a lot of traditional Chinese culture has been lost or suppressed in the meantime. Has this dance form suffered anything like that?
I think so, especially during the Cultural Revolution. That was when, under communist rule, traditional Chinese culture was being systematically destroyed. Literature, arts, temples were getting smashed, and it's being systematically destroyed. It's not just here and there. It was all planned. And even the arts in China nowadays, a lot of it's kind of used as a tool for propaganda. So it doesn't matter if it's dance, if it's movies, if it's any kind of media that we consume, there's an agenda behind that media, that it's being depicted in China. But here in the West, and especially with Shenyun Performing Arts, I think we're trying to show the world what true traditional China is all about, the real culture of the Chinese people. And one thing that I think really stands out is Chinese history. A cornerstone of it was faith, like Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism. This is really a cornerstone of traditional Chinese history. And in China today, a lot of that is not depicted. But in our dance competition and in Shenyun performance, a lot of that is depicted and shown to the world.
Now, bringing it back to our NTD competition this year, as a judge, what kind of qualities will you be looking for in those performances?
I think the most basic thing for me is shenfa. That's like the foundation of classical Chinese dance. Your movements, your poses has to be precise. So it's like when you speak or when you're giving a presentation, you have to speak clearly for your audience to understand. And then on top of that, I'm looking at your bearing, your shenyun. What are you trying to communicate with the audience? Can you really move the audience? As a judge, am I, moved after watching your performance? I really want to see the audience, the dancers, when they're on stage, they're sincere. So if you're depicting, maybe Yue Fei, he's a character that was known for his loyalty. You had to move me with your loyalty that's depicted on stage.
Lastly, on a more personal note, I know this is the second time that you are judging in this competition. Have you also performed on stage as a contestant yourself?
Yeah, I've competed quite a few times before. I think almost like 5 times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so quite a few times I've competed in the competition. So I know how the whole process is, and it's not easy to prepare these pieces and go and compete, putting yourself out there for the world to see. So I really respect a lot of these dancers, and it's great to see so many young people coming to, I guess, like preserving this tradition and culture, and keeping it alive. And also, like, they're very, very talented and amazing dancers. So I'm really happy to see them competing.
And you can watch the competition's semifinals and final on September 13th and 14th. It will be live streamed on NTD or in person at the Sugarloaf Performing Arts Center in New York. For tickets, visit dance.ntdtv.com. China's Unitree Robotics is looking at a company valuation that could value the company at up to $7 billion. That's according to two people familiar with the plan. The startup is one of China's newest and most high-profile tech companies. Let's take a closer look.
Unitree Robotics could be on course for one of the most high-profile IPOs in China in years. Sources said the firm is looking at a valuation of as much as $7 billion for its planned initial public offering. The launch could test investor interest in the frontier industry of humanoid robots. The Chinese firm's robots previously caught the popular imagination globally when it released videos of them showing human-like capabilities. Its founder, Wang Xingxing, was also among a small number of executives who attended a rare meeting with President Xi Jinping in February. Startups including Unitree and DeepSeek have proved popular, and it comes with Beijing investing billions of dollars in robotics, semiconductors and AI. Unitree said last week on its X account that it was actively advancing the IPO preparations. The firm said it expected to submit the listing application documents in the fourth quarter of the year. It didn't provide other details, including a timeline for a potential listing. The sources said Unitree plans to list on Shanghai's tech-focused Star Market. Unitree won major new investors in a previous June funding round, including giants like Alibaba, Tencent and Geely.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. Round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.